the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon and a warm welcome to the National Human Rights Commission. This morning we are here to this epoch-making event of the submission of an EndSARS report to the National Human Rights Commission by Enough is Enough. And before we proceed, ladies and gentlemen, may I very humbly ask that we stand up and sing and recite rather the second stanza of the Nigerian national anthem. It's behind me here for those of you that don't know how to recite it. After the count of two. 1, 2. O God of creation, direct our noble cause, guide our leaders right. Help our youth the truth to know, in love and honesty to grow. Great lofty heights attain, to build a nation where peace and justice shall reign. May we be seated? And may peace and justice continue to reign in this country. Yes, I know. Thank you very much. Before we proceed, I would like to introduce our host. I'm talking about the Executive Secretary and the Chief Executive Officer of the National Human Rights Commission, Dr. Tony Ojukwu, OFR, SAN, FICM. May you put your hands together for him. I would also like to introduce the Executive Director, Enough is Enough Nigeria, in person of Yemi Adamolekun. Put your hands together for her. May I also recognize the presence of Professor Deji Adekunle, SAN, a former Director General, Nigerian Institute for Legal Studies, Advanced Legal Studies. Seated with them also at the high table is Mr. Samson Itodo, the founder of Yaga Africa. Put your hands together for him. I'd like to recognize all the directors of the National Human Rights Commission here present. I'd like to recognize all our partners and stakeholders here present. I'd like to recognize especially the media in our midst today. At this point, I would like to call on the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission for his opening remarks. Thank you.
The Executive Director of Enough is Enough, my dear sister, Amy, our own Professor Deji Adekunle, the former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. Whenever I introduce something, I claim ownership because Samson Itodo, you know, the founder of Yaga Africa, is a product of the National Human Rights Commission. We groomed him. So you guys should know today that we are doing well. At least if we have products like Samson Itodo, that means we are really grooming human rights activists. And just before I finished, the chair of the Human Rights Institute of the Nigerian Bar Association, Chinoyo Biagwu, London Senior Advocates. Yeah, you're welcome, sir. And colleagues from the National Human Rights Commission, directors, members of the civil society, members of the diplomatic corps, and and our own media, who without you, what we say will end up in this room, but we want it to be heard in every part of the world. Thank you very much and welcome. This is a very important step, which is one of the activities we are using to commemorate the 2020 SARS protests in Nigeria. You recall that on the 20th of October 2020, we had SARS protests in Nigeria. So the way things happen in Nigeria, people easily move on to other things. But as human rights defenders, we are trained to make sure that we keep things on the front burner. We don't allow things to go away like that. So this is one of the efforts being made to keep the EndSARS protest alive, owing to the gallant effort of Enough is Enough, that has conducted some review of the Judicial panel reports in collaboration with the National Human Rights Commission. Maybe we should refresh ourselves of the events that led to the setting up of the panels. You recall we had about 29 panels set up in this country to deal with the avalanche of cases of complaints of human rights violation arising from the EndSARS protests of 2020. And following the spate of those complaints and the numerous reports in the electronic, print, and social media alleging gross violations of human rights of Nigerians by the men and officers of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the Nigerian Police Force, the federal government of Nigeria, to the then acting president, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, requested the National Human Rights Commission to constitute a broad-based presidential panel, including the representatives of civil society organizations, to investigate allegations of human rights violations following the EndSARS protests. As part of the terms of reference, the panels were to make appropriate recommendations for the reform of SARS and for the police force in general. And following that, about 29 states set up SARS panel, and the National Human Rights Commission was made a compulsory member of each of those panels. In addition, the National Human Rights Commission also set up a panel in the FCT, and which dealt with cases both in the FCT and from all over the country, because as complainants are free to take their complaint to any state, any branch of the panel, and some did come from other states if they felt it was easier for them to push their case at the panel here. Of course, most of the states have finished their work. Some of them have concluded their reports, and some of them have also paid compensation. Of course, you are aware that the panel in Abuja here paid a compensation of 438 million to victims of human rights violation arising from the EndSARS protest. And the panel also made robust recommendations to the Police Service Commission and the Attorney General of the Federation for the purposes of either prosecuting those who were indicted by the panel or meting out disciplinary action, since that falls squarely under the purview of the Police Service Commission. I'm happy to announce that last week we got a letter from the Police Service Commission reassuring the Commission that they are taking steps to make sure that appropriate disciplinary action are taken against those who have been recommended by the panel. So here today, the Enough is Enough has taken a giant step to conduct this judicial review and compile the report which we are going to launch here today. So I must commend the gallant effort of Enough is Enough as one of those steps taken by human rights defenders to make sure that things are not swept under the carpet, to make sure that the right lessons learned from the EndSARS protests are not forgotten, and to make sure that, just like the government promised, that the efforts of these panels are geared towards large-scale police reforms and reform of the SARS. So this is keeping that dream alive. And we are going to use this opportunity also to urge other states that have not completed their reports, or that have not implemented their reports, or that have not paid compensation to do so, so that we would have made some progress. Because if after all these things nothing is done, that means we wouldn't have made much progress. On the part of the Commission will continue to work with stakeholders who mean well for this country, stakeholders who want to uphold human rights commission, who want to uphold human rights and deal with cases of violation like enough is enough. And then the Commission, further to what enough has done today with the Commission, we are also compiling the reports of all the 29 panels across the 29 states, and we are hoping that when we're able to put this together, I think we've been able to collect about 16 state panel reports now, and we are waiting for the feedback from the other states. And once this is completed, we should be able to have a global view of the recommendations made across the various states. We should be able to have a global view of officers to be prosecuted, officers to be disciplined, victims to be paid compensation, the total volume of compensation. And we'll be urging that the states should not think that because these panels were directed to be set up by the federal government, it therefore becomes the sole responsibility of the federal government to deal with issues arising from these panels. The first issue to be noted there is that these police officers were serving in the various states. The citizens whose rights were violated are indigenes of the various states. So there's no reason why the states where these violations occurred should not at least pay compensation to their citizens as required by the Constitution. On the issue of prosecution and discipline, we know that the police is a federal institution, and in terms of respect for the separation of powers and for the various levels of government, yes, disciplinary issues and prosecution issues can be handled by the Police Service Commission and the Attorney General of the Federation. However, the state attorney generals can also prosecute criminal offenses if committed in their various states. For instance, cases of torture and inhuman and degrading treatment, other cases of human rights violation which are criminal that resulted from these violations could also be dealt by the Attorney General of those states. And then as to the matter of compensation, we don't think that states should be waiting for the federal government to collect all the compensation and pay. We think the states should make the issue of these violations a priority to deal with. You will recall that where most states construct federal government roads, because their main reason is always that it is the indigenes of the state that are using those roads that suffer any disadvantages that come from the bad roads that belong to the federal government within the state. They therefore go ahead in the interest of the citizens of the state to make those roads usable by the citizens of the state, and then they'll claim the amount from the federal government later. So in this case now, we also say that the state governments should pay compensation to their indigenes who were affected by the EndSARS protests arising from these panels of judicial panel reports. And then they can now make claims from the federal government, but at least the victims of these violations would have been compensated. So having said that, I will now be saying we are welcome to this event, and we urge every one of us who could do anything to make sure that the efforts of stakeholders to make sure that our police is accountable, to make sure that human rights violations are reduced, to make sure we don't have another EndSARS protest. And that reminds me to make the point about one of the decisions of the National Economic Council to make sure that we don't have future EndSARS protests, which is that every state government should also establish a committee on human rights that will deal with subsequent cases of violation against law enforcement agents like the police and the military. And in those panels are supposed to be representatives of NBA, representatives of the National Human Rights Commission, representatives of the police, representatives of the military. And of course, the governor is the chair in every state. And that committee is supposed to look at emerging cases of violations and deal with them so that we don't have an avalanche of complaints of human rights violation against law enforcement agents that could lead to another EndSARS protest. So this is an opportunity to a wake-up call to everyone, a wake-up call on the civil society to impress on the various state governments to make sure that these human rights committees are set up and to make sure that they are working. And of course, the information to be used by these human rights committees to work will come from members of the civil society who witness human rights violations across the state. And the whole idea about the police reforms and this kind of initiative is to make sure that we don't have another EndSARS protest which will lead to massive human rights violations. And on that note, I want to welcome all of us to this ceremony and let us have useful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And that was the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, Dr. Tony Ojukwu, highlighting the efforts of the National Human Rights Commission in bringing to the barest minimum police brutality. At this point, before we proceed, may I formally welcome Mr. Chino Obiagu. He is seated on the high table already. He is the Chairman, Human Rights Institute of the Nigerian Bar Association and the General Counsel, National SARS Panel. Put your hands together for him. May I also use this time to recognize Mr. Stephen Schleimer of the U.S. Embassy. Put your hands together for him. Oduak Abassi of the German Embassy is also here with us. You're welcome. You're welcome. Amina Halifat, Amnesty International. You are also welcome. Aminu Halifat.
Representing AGF.
Pardon?
Representing
AGF. Okay, I would also like to introduce Mr. Felix Ota Okoje, representing the AGF. Let us see. Okay, you're welcome. At this point, I would like to invite to the high table Bagudu Nathaniel, Kaduna State Youth Representative on EndSARS panel. He's a member of the panel to the high table. I would also like to introduce Ikemesit Efyong, Head of Research, SBM Intelligence, who is going to join us via Zoom. And at this point, I would like to hand over to Ufoma to continue from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Okay. All right. So at this point of the panel, we'll be discussing the research finding. The research focused on Anambra, the FCT, Lagos, and Oyo State. So we'll be calling on Efyong who is the head of research at SBM Intelligence, will be to present the findings of his team's research in these states. Hi, Kemesit.
Hello, Tom. Good afternoon. I hope.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Just want to. I'm sorry. There's some audio feedback. I can't hear myself.
Hi, Kemesit.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Are you able to put on your video?
I have a very active one, so I pay attention to turn on my video. There's still some audio feedback, so I can hear myself and it's a little.
Okay, please can you go on?
Okay, I'll try. First, I want to appreciate the National Human Rights Commission, Nigeria, and also that forward-going work in terms of driving police sector reform, right, in order to promote human rights and accountability. That's also very critical, right, in this day and age. We're in a new administration now that's obviously inherited, since governance is a continuum, right, some of the responsibilities and the demands, right, from the previous administration. And so what all of us in the room need to do as actors is to ensure that, the legacy of the work that so many actors, including many of you who are in the room, right, towards fostering and engendering accountability and transparency in policing in Nigeria does not get lost just because, right, there has been a transition of power. We would love, right, as this conversation, right, goes on, that everyone takes a look at the report, offers, obviously insights and feedback, and looking forward to hearing the thoughts of, all of our other partners in the room, as well as, anyone who has a perspective on this issue. Thank you very much for listening and your time.
Thank you very much, Ikemesit, for that. Okay. So next up, we would be speaking to Ibrahim Farouk, who's the Program Coordinator, Africa Division for Yaga Africa. Please come up. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Ibrahim, we understand that Yaga Africa had observers in the states where the panel, in 29 states, and the FCT where the panels were set up. Do you think that the entire process meets the expectations of citizens during the panel sittings? Do you think that the process met the expectations that citizens had? And what were the challenges highlighted by your team during that process? Sorry?
Thank you very much. And I think I'll try and answer this as quickly as I can because Ikemesit has already touched on some of the issues. Following the EndSARS protest in 2020, Yaga Africa deployed citizen observers to the 29 panels that had been set up. And citizens had a lot of expectations that the panels were going to provide justice, especially considering a lot that had happened and the demands that young people had made. Unfortunately, we saw a continued mistrust in Nigerian government institutions because a lot of Nigerian youth did not feel that the panels provided justice for them. When we look at the reports, for instance, we'll see that there is only one judicial panel of inquiry that has made its report public, and I think that is the panel from Lagos. I think just one very simple step is being more transparent and accountable by making the reports public so that young people who are at the panels, who made presentations at the panels, for instance, can see that justice was done or justice was said to have been done. But Ikemesit also spoke about some of the challenges, and I'll just try and touch on them a bit more. One of them was administrative, technical, and resource constraints that the panels had to deal with. After the National Economic Council set up the panels were asked to sit for a period of 6 months. But from observing the 29 panels, we could see that some panels sat from anything between 2 months or 12 weeks, for some up to a year. I think the panel in the FCT sat for about 18 months, but within that time there was about a 9-month break. So we had varied experiences in the different panels. We saw some panels that had to be suspended usually for financial constraints. We saw that there were also technical challenges that many of the panels had. So those were many of the challenges that we faced. But the final challenge, I think, for us, and it's 3 years since these panels began sitting, is that there hasn't been a supply of accountability by releasing these reports and making them public by the judicial panels of inquiry. I think 3 years is enough time, and it was very interesting to hear the executive secretary say that they've compiled reports from 16 states. It means that we still have other states where the reports either are not public or cannot be found. And this is a challenge that we're still having to deal with 3 years after the EndSARS protests.
Sorry. So for gentlemen of the press, what would be easy for you? Because as people speak, the idea of you running from one end to that end with the microphones, where should we be that will make it easy for you? Sorry? Can you provide some direction, just so it's not as distracting? Because if we go from Ibrahim and Samson wants to speak, then you carry all the mics and run over here as well. So how do we make this easy for you? Everybody should go there. Okay, so do we want to set up the mics over where Ufoma is, and then everybody who wants to speak would go there? Yeah? I think that would help. Or it will fall. Okay, go to where Ibrahim is. Okay. So we'll be playing musical chairs. All right, we're here for that. Oh, actually, you know what? Maybe come and set it up here. So it's at least a bit center, so it's not. So I'm happy to move. So it's not at the extreme end, and we have the ear sitting right next to it to give it power and authority. So set up the mics right here, and that way we're not doing musical chairs. Could you pass this?
All right. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Ibrahim. I think on ground, so it was important that we understood that process. Mr. Chinoye Obiagu, who is the chairman of the Human Rights Institute, the Nigerian Bar Association, and the General Counsel of the National SARS panel. We understand that the NBA provided some legal services or legal aid to judicial panels. Do you think victims got justice? I think that's our first question. Do you think they got justice?
Yes, thank you very much. Yemi has made me feel important with all this microphone here. I feel like a minister. Thank you very much for my issue of legal aid. No, I don't think so. My own experience at the SARS panel, I was the general counsel. I work with three lawyers from the commission, very hardworking, Halilu Adamu, Mary Puadundi, and Mr. Afolabi. For over 2 years they were here in this hall, providing free legal services to 600 plus cases. And I'm coming to that. Nigerian lawyers didn't do well in standing up to victims at that occasion. And I think that's a lesson that we need to learn. Whether the victims got justice is a completely different game. Because justice is not just the process, but also the substance. And the first lesson for SARS panel is that it's usually the very poor people and vulnerable people that are victims, and they don't have any voice. When National Human Rights Commission set up the SARS panel and announced call for petitions, within 1 month, about 600 plus petitions were submitted. That is really remarkable. In other words, there are a lot of people there's a huge demand for justice, but there's very little supply of justice from the institutions. So a lot of people came out to submit their petitions, and it was so overwhelming. So at a point, the Secretary had to sift through the reports and identify those that are really related to EndSARS, and then put them out. So that's the first lesson. The second lesson is that out of those 600 plus, nearly half did not come up to speak because there was always a fear for reprisals. Now, once you write a petition against a policeman, the policeman finds the person that writes the petition and says, if I see you there, we have so many cases of people who will come the first time that they will disappear. In other words, there is no witness protection process. People are scared to speak up And that goes around all other institutions. Look at the issue of fighting corruption. We don't have a whistleblower laws. So when people bring out information, there's no way the state protects them. There's no way the institution protects them from such being susceptible to reprisal attacks. And that made a lot of petitions to be withdrawn, and because there were no person to come and testify. The third lesson is that there's complete lack of political will from government, to deal with the issue of accountability, despite the huge protests of EndSARS. In many other jurisdictions, the uprising by young people in this country in EndSARS movement in October 2022 would have been a lesson for government to say, I think these young people have come to a dead end, and they had no other means than to kick the wall and break the ceilings. And that's what young people did. Yet, the whole thing died down. It was suppressed. Many of them were put in jail. As of June 2023, 2.5 years on, about 40 EndSARS suspects are still in detention, not charged. So there is complete lack of commitment of government at all levels, federal and state, to really respond to the needs of Nigerian youth, the energy that they demonstrated on October 2020. The fourth lesson, which is very worrisome to me, is that the Nigerian police has been emboldened because nothing happened after EndSARS. The Nigerian police, with all due respect to them from all hierarchy, thinks they are above the law. We're here in this room, a retired justice of the Supreme Court, who is the chairman of the panel, and all the panelists, we issue witness summons, we issue orders for produce to police. Police will just ignore it, and nothing happens. There's a case, a very particular case in Lagos, where Mr. Emeka John, the police, 5 armed men came to his house in Lagos, took him away. They thought they were armed robbers. It was later that, in presence of his wife and children, it was later that the wife realized that they are policemen from SARS or Kuzu in Anambra State. That was on May 5th, 2017. They carried away 3 vehicles from the compound, took away all his personal stuff in the house, and moved him away. They were able to identify the people. One is CSP Obiozo, who led the team. This man continued to serve in the police. As we speak, Mr. Emeka John has not been seen. Nobody heard about him. His children are nobody. The wife went to court. Anambra State High Court gave a judgment that the police should produce him. 2019. As we speak, the police has not answered to that court order. They have not produced Mr. Emeka. The lady came here and reported to the SARS panel. The SARS panel, I represented the family. The SARS panel issued more than 10 summons that it should be produced, or those policemen should come. Those 3 policemen from SARS or Kuzu, led by CSP Obiozo, should come to the panel to explain why they arrested this guy, why they disappeared this guy. None of them came to the panel, and nothing happened. That is very worrisome. Not even the AC. When we now summon the Commissioner of Police Legal to come, because he's supposed to bring the case file, let us even know what happened, because the police said they had this case file. The Commissioner of Police Legal refused to come. And what is worrisome is that nothing happens. The impunity is alarming, because the police and all law enforcement agents, including, you see what DSS is doing now? Very soon, Boys Brigade will start on. Every law enforcement agent thinks they're above the law, and they can't obey court orders, and nothing happens. I think it's a call for citizens to rise up, because the reason why they're doing this is that after the EndSARS panel, there was a huge energy that was mobilized across Nigeria. Well, not across Nigeria, and I'm going to come back to that. But that energy fizzled out after the Lekki massacre. And therefore, there was no using those energy to demand for accountability. Where are the leaders of EndSARS? Was there a structured follow-up and sustained movement to ensure that justice was done for those who are massacred? Lagos State wanted to bury 103 corpses recovered from EndSARS. Does it mean there's no identification of those people? Their families are not contacted. They're just going to do a mass grave. And everybody's moving on. So the energy that was citizens' response to continue with the momentum of EndSARS was lost. And I think what Enough is Enough is doing now, I call her the president of citizens, is to garner up that momentum so that we begin to demand for accountability. Not just for EndSARS, but for all police brutalities. Now, when the report came from FCT, our report recommended that certain people will be paid compensation and certain police officers, about 29 or so, should be retired and some should be prosecuted. The report was submitted. None of the policemen has been queried. None has been suspended. None has been prosecuted. What the National Human Rights Commission, and God bless Mr. Ojukwu, is that with the issue of compensation, they mobilized about 500 million naira and paid victims, people who lost their loved ones, who came here and were crying. They paid them how much? How much money will compensate for a loss of a loved one? But at least it assuages their pain. And I think the Human Rights Commission has done that. Now, in Lagos State, the report is being disputed. Some members say, oh, this is the report. No, this is not the report. Oh, this is the report. And these are victims. Now they want to bury corpses that were not investigated. Why did these people die? 103 citizens of Nigeria? Because they are poor people, so nobody speaks for them. So I think in the issue of justice, there's completely no justice yet from SARS panel. Let me just say finally that the lessons of EndSARS is also the lessons of pro-democracy movement. When there was a struggle against the military for pro-democracy, perhaps there was no post-victory plan. Because when you finish the protest, what next? So when EndSARS protest started, there was no plan. What are we asking from government? Then what happened after that? How do you articulate a response? How do you articulate a follow-up? How do you sustain those demands? Maybe there was no strong traction or structured leadership. There was no strong figure around which the EndSARS was collated. And that's why these are fizzled out. So we need to begin to, and that's a message for young people, you need to begin to organize, not to agonize. Begin to organize. Get yourself together and begin to demand that this report should be published. The second thing is to use all the institutions that are supposed to respond for accountability. The National Assembly is very good. We are with the Human Rights Committee of National Assembly, and they were asking this question about the EndSARS report. What has happened? So as we celebrate the 3rd anniversary of EndSARS protest, they begin to look at the questions, begin to organize and see how we can deal with the police. SARS was disbanded, but they are still there. They simply rebranded them. And they are now even worse, because now they pick you up, they say, okay, go and protest, let's see. Go to Lekki Toll Gate, let's see. Nothing happens. So you emboldened the protest to continue to breach human rights. We want to thank Enough is Enough for taking this initiative. I also know that Global Rights also is doing something about mourning. So who is the civil society should be able to get energy. The final point I want to make, which is a lesson, is that if you look at EndSARS report, EndSARS panel, it is mainly the states in southern part of the country that set up EndSARS panel. As a matter of fact, it was mainly in the states in the south that EndSARS protest occurred. So there's also a geopolitics to police brutality, to demand for accountability. If you go from here, if you travel from Abuja to Enugu, you may meet about 100 checkpoints, isn't it? And each of them, young people are harassed, especially when you have dreadlocks. You are profiled. But if you travel from here to Maiduguri, you may not meet up to 10 checkpoints. So there's a geopolitics of the whole of police activities. We need to interrogate it. Why is it that these panels are concentrated in the south? Why is it that their reports are not being published? Why should the government sit on it? especially when it concerns citizens. And I think that's a lesson that we should take forward as enough is enough is living in this process of revisiting the judicial panel reports. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chinoye, for that.
So my tenure as a minister has finished.
All right. So we will have now, because we're very discussing way forward and lessons that we can learn and how we can apply them, we'll be collapsing both panels. And so we would like to invite Mr. Felix Mtar to join us on the who is he? Who is representing, who's representing the Attorney General and Honorable Minister of Justice, Latin Fadwe. Please join us. Thank you very much, sir. All right. So among our panelists, we have one of the, like Mr. Chinoye said, advising the youth. So we have one of the youth representatives that was on the Kaduna State Judicial Panel, Agudu. So Nathaniel, given that you were on the panel, right? Did you have equal rights and an equal voice on the panel during the panel sitting?
Well, permit me to start by appreciating the organizers of this wonderful event for giving me the opportunity to be among you guys and speak on behalf of the youth representative of the panel of inquiry that investigate into police brutality. In response to your question, the panel in Kaduna State was a very great panel. As you are aware, Kaduna State is one of the first states to inaugurate a panel of inquiry into police brutality. And in that panel, we have a leader, Chief Justice David Shiri, retired, who also believes in the same cause and has given opportunity not only to young people, but to all concerned parties who are key actors to the process, and then who he believes they can contribute positively to the success of the assignment assigned to us. So in the panel, we have equal right. We give each other the necessary backing and support to succeed, because all of us are moving toward the same target.
Thank you very much. It's good to know that we had equal rights during the panel. So my final question for you would be that, how did you feel hearing those cases? Since you were live there, how was the feeling for you? Were you affected mentally? Was there any form of trauma that you experienced, hearing those cases?
Actually, at the initial, when I received a call from the Office of His Excellency that I have been nominated to serve as a member of the Judicial Panel of Inquiry, I used to imagine, do we really have much cases of police brutality in the northern part of the state? And I didn't actually believe it, not until we created a room for submission of cases. Those who are brutalized by police or mistreated by police force. We decentralize our centers for collection of petitions in both senatorial district, and then for zone 3 we have established a center in Kafanchan to give people from that zone access to submit their petition without coming down to Kaduna to submit their own petition, looking at the time and then the resources involved. So also we have a center in Kafanchan and Kaduna, the Ministry of Justice. Now, when we received at the initial, we had the total number of 62 cases that were submitted. So out of which about 80 to 90% of these petitions are directly involved with young people. And you realize that there are cases that you can't imagine that a fellow human can do same to his fellow man. For instance, we have a case of one Amora in the police command in Kaduna who was killed in the police custody. And investigation is still going on, and the corpse is there laying down in Boroduko Hospital for more than 25 years. The corpse is still there up to today. And up to now, because we are young people from the state that can easily identify, most of these victims of police brutality will come into us and say, Oga, up to now you have not said anything about our case. And we have constraints and limitations. Our work was to make findings and then do the necessary recommendation to the government. And we have done that. Now you realize, apart from that, there are so many other cases that young people were brutalized, and up to now, nothing has been done. There is another case that we went to visit in Wawa Cantonment in Niger State. You know, a young person who was unlawfully arrested, and they kept him there for over 10 years. I think since 2011, he has been in that underground prison. So we went there, able to interact with him. And when you see him, you won't even believe that this is a human being. So these are people who demand justice, who are supposed to get justice from the appropriate authority, and they were denied to access justice. They were denied a fair hearing. They just arrest them unlawfully without prosecution. You just send them to jail, to prison for a number of these years. So I feel it's inhuman, and actually the whole process was just entirely. At a point I wanted to resign from the panel, but God, with the support of God and our leaders in the panel, we were able to push to the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, Nathaniel and Ibrahim, you can. Thank you very much. So, speaking from another youth rep who was the youth representative on the EndSARS Judicial panel in Lagos State, she is unavoidably absent today, so we'll be having. Thank you. We'll be having a video from Rinu Oduala. So while the video is coming up, I'll hand over to my colleague Ibrahim to take over from here. Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you to all the key stakeholders, the entire team involved, and each and every one of you present here today to review the findings and outcomes of the EndSARS judicial panels. I'd like to say thank you as well to EIE Nigeria, Yaga Africa, National Human Rights Commission, and SBM Intelligence for standing with us throughout this challenging journey. Also, on behalf of the frontliners of the EndSARS movement, thank every civil society organization who has stayed with us in the fight so far. Hello everyone, my name is Rinu Oduala. After 3 years of the trauma, of pain, of anger, the question remains that SARS really end. The menace called police brutality in Nigeria hasn't reduced a bit. Young people are being seen as enemies in their own nation. They are profiled, they are threatened, they are being made to write false statements under duress, they are extorted, they are tortured, they are shaken down, and if they are unlucky, they are killed. I can vividly recall, because I documented it, and show you at least 30 faces of young people who have been murdered by police officers between 2020 and now. 30 promising lives representing our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations for a better Nigeria. 30 you, 30 me. When a young person is killed by the police, it's not just a person. It's not just a number. It's not just a life cut short. It's a family destroyed. It's a community living in fear. So the effects of police violence, of this police brutality that we're talking about, extend beyond the incidents themselves. Behind these 30 faces, there are real people. There are real families. There are real communities. That could be any one of us here today. Behind the scene of this 30 number is also thousands of undocumented cases, thousands of other Nigerian families who pay salaries of police officers that can kill them at any time. And when we try to speak, they shut us down with bullets, with intimidation. How can we be grateful for a democracy where lives are being lost for speaking up? How can we be grateful when a government orders soldiers to shoot at protesters and proceeds to cover it up? How can we be grateful for a police force that is granted the license to violate citizens' rights, to torture, to kill citizens with impunity? But I'm not here to remind you of how we started. I'm here to confront you with the stark reality of where we are at now. And that place is that police brutality hasn't stopped. In fact, it is growing every day with emboldened police officers, criminals in uniform who are on threats. And the problem here is that our future leaders are at risk. Our families are at risk. I am at risk. You are at risk too. And until we stop being at risk, until our cries for justice are heeded, until our demands for change are met, cannot afford to rest. We must keep fighting, we must increase our efforts, the loudness of our voices, our advocacy, our anger. For that kid who could die by the roadside, like Tina Ezekwe, to prevent the likes of Bolanle Rahim from being killed with babies in our stomach. We must raise our voices for a Nigeria where future generations can live in peace and dignity. We must raise our voices against police violence. We must raise our voices for the EndSARS movement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reno. And Reno is not able to join us, but I'm going to invite a few more people to join us on the high table. First and foremost, I would welcome Mtar Modibo, who is the Secretary General of Follow the Money International. Please put your hands together for Mtar as he joins us. Also joining us is Salahuddin Hashim, who is representing the Executive Director, Mr. Gad Peter. Salahuddin, if you can please join us on the high table. You're very welcome. Already on the high table, who is part of this panel, is Professor Deji Adekunle, SAN, who is the former Director General of the Nigerian Institute for Advanced Legal Studies. As we segue into the next panel, I'm just going to ask my panelists one question. And that question is, what is the way forward? We have heard the video from Reno, who had said that policemen are now emboldened. Mr. Chinonye had also made the same point. And so the question that we're going to answer is that 3 years after the EndSARS tests, we've also heard the findings from the research, and Ikemesit presented some of those findings, and some of them were discussed in the last panel. So what do we need to do? Are there systemic changes? Are there things that we need to do differently? As we reflect, especially as young Nigerians who came out to protest, were there things that we did not do enough of? And are there things that we need to be doing differently moving forward? But to summarize the question is to say, what is the way forward for young Nigerians? What is the way forward for the Nigerian police force? What is the way forward for all stakeholders involved to ensure that we can end police brutality? So I would give the mic to Professor Adekunle, and then I would invite Salahuddin, and then Mtar will also come up and speak. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, the Executive Secretary and everyone here present. It's refreshing to see that whilst these panels were sitting and elaborating their different reports, there was some kind of oversight in terms of this research. And that's really, it really emphasizes the vibrancy of civil society, always testing, always checking to see that the right things were being done. Let me take off from where the Chair Human Rights Commission stopped in terms of what we have seen about the attitudes of the police. There is no doubt that
we have seen increased cases of brutality. I'm also careful to say that we have also seen efforts by the Inspector General to visit those cases with the necessary sanctions. We have seen instances where state attorneys general have stepped in and said, no, we are not going to just be content with administrative measures, but we are going to take these rights through to the courts. So we have seen convictions, and we are also seeing prosecutions ongoing. But all these are not enough. That's the truth. For maybe one case that is reported, there are thousands that are not reported. They are all, you see them, and the more we see them being reported on the tabloids and on social media, the more disquiet one feels that this impunity and this brutality on the part of our law enforcement agents that are being paid, that are being employed to protect Nigerians, are also the ones brutalizing Nigerians. So in terms of the way forward, there are several things staring us in the face, and then there are some that are not quite evident from the reports. And I want to pick one of the points made by the Executive Secretary, particularly in terms of periodic reviews. So periodic reviews are important because if you take the avalanche of petitions that was dumped on the SARS panel here in Abuja, it was humanly impossible actually to go through all these reports exhaustively. And as you heard, there needed to be some sifting in order to have proper traction. Then again, when I listened to AK messages about the frequent adjournments, most times it wasn't just about funding. So it was about getting and ensuring that the case was built up properly. You know, forensic tests had to be done, ballistic tests had to be done, and so on and so forth. And there was time needed to be given to allow the panels to take this, to take informed decisions about things. But yes, funding was a critical issue, but many panels became quite resourceful in thinking out of the box in solving these problems in order to get on with the job. So, like I said, periodic reviews, if for instance you had the Human Rights Commission periodically hold inquiries and investigations into human rights abuses by the police, it should be able to lead to a routine weeding system. You know, so it's not a knee-jerk thing, that it's not something the IG does when you are reported, but a systemic process by which you can actually identify persons who shouldn't really be in the police force. There is also the impunity gap. How do we address this? Because it is there. Impunity, as you heard, also extends to the kind of attitude panels got when police officers were summoned or requested to attend panel sittings to some allegations. And I think again here that you could actually take this at two levels. Recall that even at the time these panels were sitting, the Anti-Torture Act had actually been passed. And one of the provisions of the Anti-Torture Act had said that some of the consequences, punishments for torture, particularly perpetrated by police, would be visited on the police personnel responsible. So I like to suggest this simple issue. Judgment debts, for instance. Well, you had tons of judgment debts that were unsatisfied, even during the pandemic. I think they were like 70 something. And they ran into billions, you know. So what I would like to suggest is, here we are with palliatives being given to states to monitor. It would, for me, seem a very lame excuse to say that, oh, we did not budget for judgment debts. Who budgets for liabilities? There are contingencies. Once it happens, it happens. And what you just need to do primarily is to see to compensating and redressing whatever wrongs have been done by your agents of government. I will then suggest that a proportion, a percentage, law enforcement agents these days, they talk about being incentivized, being encouraged. Customs will come and say we brought in so much revenue into the purse of government. EFCC will come and say the same thing in terms of process of crime. I don't know how much the police brings in. I don't know how much DSS brings in. But I know that if all they bring to government is a load of grief, then they should share in the grief. So I would just say that so much of what government pays in terms of liabilities and compensations, a percentage should just be taken from the budget of these organizations. And the heads of these organizations will have to drill down to the units responsible for that liability and ensure that the heads of those units also know why their budget has been cut for that year. I think once you have these kinds of things going on, it hits the nerve, and they get it really touches them as to what Nigerians are feeling. The other thing, and this is a suggestion also to the IG, no matter how much he invokes disciplinary action, no matter the intensity with which he reads out bulletins on zero tolerance for brutality, zero tolerance for extortion and all that, there seems to be some Well, we're glad that it could have been worse, but we thank God that in His mercy, the accident that just happened, we were spared a lot of grief on that. So let me just wrap up here. So my own pith, really, apart from any other thing I've said, is let any agency, let the officers of men of any unit or any formation, let them feel the pinch of liability that has been paid by government. I know lawyers will talk about vicarious liability and things like that, but even in thought, and this is not thought, we're talking about lives of people, we're talking about rights of people. So even in tort and civil liability, the employer would ask the employee that, did I send you? You were on a frolic of your own. And the mere fact that you are wearing a uniform should not mean that you can simply snuff out the life or torture people at will. My last shot here will be in terms of orientation. And we keep talking about this. One thing that the EndSARS did was to have a revamp, a complete revamp of the syllabus in police training colleges. So you have human rights infused in the syllabus, but are we seeing the evidence of that? So, these things you can simply talk over the head of people. Yes, you can take them through a human rights training, but are they really imbibing those principles? And I think, again, I would encourage the Police Service Commission and the Inspector General of Police, together with the human rights community, led by the Human Rights Commission, to engage them frequently in roundtables, look at focused discussions on incidents and x-ray issues or recommendations or remedies that could be used for lessons to be learnt on the part of others, so that for every incident that happens, people must learn lessons, and those lessons have to drill down to the officers and men of the police force. I think that, for me, would be how to move forward on the EndSARS panel reports. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next we would have Salahuddin Hashim, who is representing the Executive Director of Clean Foundation.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to also acknowledge the protocol seated here on the high table. But of course, for me, is the fact that the panels offered us an opportunity to vent. And then, of course, we have database and adequate figures, factor figures that we could work with. Over time, there has been quite a lot of speculations as to whether or not these things happen. But now we have specificity. And then, of course, we have references as to how they came about and how it happened. And then, of course, we're looking into the future. What are the things we should look out for? First is that we need to have policing for a democratic society. And that, for me, is very fundamental. Policing that respect rights of citizens, and then, of course, offer individuals an opportunity to also be proven guilty until the court in itself says otherwise. So there must be a framework within the law that allows for this to happen, and policing should be for purposes of protection and to serve, and policing should not be in any way to undermine citizens for any reason. That is number one. Two is that we must be able to also focus very strongly on the recruitment process into the police and the policing institutions. There is a lot of challenge into political interferences, into commercialization of recruitment, and that for me has consistently brought in the kinds of individuals and bad egg that offer the sort of violations that has been on the increase. So we need to focus a lot more as to how we pay some attention to the issue that borders around recruitment. And that for me, over time has suggested, because there are quite a lot of incidences and stories as to those who got recruited through some kind of means just because they needed to satisfy some political godfathers. And thirdly for me is the need for us to look at some legal frameworks. The existing Police Act, amended 2020, had offered a number of innovations, and those innovations are quite unique. Unfortunately, there seems to be a little bit of some gap between the Police Act as amended and the police regulation. So if we have actually done a whole lot to respond by providing the act, then I think there is a lot more that needs to be done with the police regulation, and how we can also bring it up to standard to match with modern realities. That for me is very fundamental, because the police regulation is still obsolete and does not offer us the kind of capability that we also need to see. Number four is that we need to also modernize our policing system, providing some level of technology. If we reduce interface with citizens, opportunities are there that the level and the frequency of violations would also reduce. So there's a need for us to enhance our policing operations, largely using technology, and that in itself will reduce the kind of interface we have with citizens. And again, for me, maybe finally, is for us to be able to see some level of functionality around resourcing, because we need to provide some level of additional resources that will help to strengthen and institutionalize some of these recommendations that the panels have also put forward. But maybe lastly is the issue of community policing. Community policing must be seen as one of the innovative approaches going forward in terms of how we put community safety platforms and partnership together as a vital mechanism to strengthening civil military or civil security relationship, and using those kind of relationship platform to learn lessons, using these whole lessons that we have gathered and addressing long-standing grievances that we have seen over time. So these are some of the summaries of some of the next steps that I thought should be on the table. But maybe summary and finally is the orderly room trial. We need to strengthen the orderly room trial and increase it to be able to become more responsive to some of the emerging issues. Thank you very much, and I think I will stop at this point.
All right. Thank you for having me. And I want to stand on the existing protocol. So one of the things for me, the next steps for me as a young person is we have to look at the credibility of the institution that is called police, as well as the legitimacy of that very institution. Now, I'm from the north. I'm from the northeast, and I've come to mom one time, and she said this family friend that is a smoker, and he's just a bad person. And then there was a conversation within the house that even if it is this police, in Hausa they say police in Abash, that means even if it is police, send him to. So fundamentally we have to look at that issue of the legitimacy of how people come into police. Now, another thing we need to also look at is, a lot of times you sit back and watch on Facebook a legislator or a governor or something with a picture of plenty people, many people standing that, oh, he was able to, or he or she was able to secure job for them in the police force, right? Who are those people? I happens to be in Yola one time when a police officer was said to be from Adama, but it was done to be like returned to state. And he had a lot to drink, and obviously he could not manage his rifle. He forgot the rifle where he had to drink and then left, right? Now, these are issues that could have been prevented, right? So I think for us not to come into the issue of standing or sitting in a panel of EndSARS, why don't we prevent it? Look at the legitimacy of how police are being recruited or other security agencies are being recruited. And then aside that, we have to also look at that issue of institutional performance within the system. Now you see someone, I know of a police officer close to my house that has stayed more than like all my years. I'm up to like 25 or above that. I know him in that particular station all my life. Till today, he's in that particular station. So what do you have to say to that person? So for me, I think for us not to come and objectify people, we need to look at institutional performance, and then maybe before then look at integral human development of these people that we call police to protect us. And lastly, it's not just about, you know, whether or not there are panels. Are those panels independent, right? I know of a time that cases that has to do with myself that, you know, will go to a police and a police officer will look into your face and tell you, I will kill you and nothing will happen. And to be honest, it's still happening. I know of a 14-year-old Mohammed Abba that died in Yola of recent, that he was alleged to have stolen a phone of 15,000 naira. And now he is no more. So the reality is for us not to talk about this and keep talking about the fact that we don't have to be the victims of tomorrow. We have to prevent these issues. Preventing is maybe looking at, first, maybe can we be looking at doing drug tests before employing these police officers, looking at their track record before coming to have them to be in the police force, and also having to, you know, put them in a process that each and every one of us will know that this is the process they are taking, that is taking place within the police system, not a secret issue when that police officer happens to be somewhere and they will tell you that he was charged at some point, but I mean the charges did not really went through and then it was dropped. So I think it's a thing that we have to do as citizens, that we don't have to push the bad of us into the police force and the good of us into another system. We are guilty of all these things, you know. They will tell you, you know, teaching and police job are jobs that people like, if you're bad, we call police in and go and do. So I think we need to look into ourselves and correct ourselves, and I'm sure the system will be good. And if the system is good, all of us will benefit from the system very well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would invite Mr. Felix Otaokoje, who is representing the Attorney General of the Federation, to give us his brief remarks on what are the way forward, especially this conversation around who is responsible for paying compensation, whether it's the federal government or the state governments.
Thank you very much. I bring you greetings and from the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, who identifies with the conversation that is taking place here this afternoon. From all that has been said, you agree with me that the EndSARS and the aftermath of that sad experience is one that calls for the effort of all stakeholders in the country to address. And when it did occur, government did not just fold its hands, but the government intervened at various levels that led to the setting up of the panels that looked at the various issues that arose from the EndSARS. Now, we have to look at it holistically. holistically in the sense that government is doing its best, and we as citizens also have a part to play. The police that we are talking about are part and parcel of the society. And if we must have a good policing system, then the citizens must also rise up to ensure that we have a good policing system by supporting government to ensure that the laws that are in place are implemented. The Police Act of 2020 was effort on the part of government to reform the police and ensure that our policing system is in tune with best police practice around the world. And in implementing that act, the civil society have a role to play to ensure that the responsibility of the police as provided by the act is strictly adhered to. That is one. The second one, we also have the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, which has also provided do's and don'ts on the part of what can be done to a citizen who is in conflict with the law. Whether these laws are implemented by the various institutions that are saddled with responsibility under it is something that all of us, whether government, civil society, we need to come together to address. Same with the Anti-Torture Act. When there are problems, it's government responsibility to put in place the necessary legislative framework to address those issues. The question will be, are those legislative framework in place? The answer is yes. So the implementation of those legislative framework is a responsibility of all and sundry. So the civil society needs to continuously play their own role to ensure that institutions are held accountable based on the statutes that establish those institutions, and where they go beyond the limits of their powers, civil society can also help to ensure that those institutions are held accountable. So the EndSARS is a wake-up call for all of us to rise up to ensure that the issues, the brutality, the abuse that gave rise to the EndSARS are addressed, and the consequences that followed it are brought to the barest minimum. And I want to commend the National Human Rights Commission for the role it has played. It was reported here its effort to provide compensation for those who suffered one loss or the other as a result of that sad experience. And it's a continuous exercise. I'm sure as we move on, government will continue to look at those things to ensure that those who suffer those losses are adequately compensated. So we want to commend the organizers of this interface. The report will be very useful to government. It will be useful for policy making. It will be useful in identifying those who have still not been compensated and deserves to be compensated as we get along. To address all these issues in a society like ours can only be work in progress. But what is certain is that one day, as we get along, we'll be able to overcome these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Felix Mtar, who is representing the Attorney General of the Federation. We're quickly coming to the close of this program, but we'll just take a few contributions. One from our audience. We know that we also have our host, the National Human Rights Commission, and some of them are also in the audience, and then would come to the high table as we launch the report and close. So any comments, quick comments from the audience? Sarah, you can come up.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Tama from Kimpact Development Initiative. One of my contribution is way forward. Just like we have projected the victims and all the brutality cases, I think it would be good we also project some of the cases that got justice, so that other police officers will know that it's not everyone that gets away with some of these issues. It can happen to any of them. So it will serve as caution to some of them. This is my contribution.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'll now pass the microphone to Mr. Samson Itodo, who is also going to make some quick comments around forward. We're so happy that Yemi is back with us, and she would come up as we launch the report and close. But Samson.
Well, thank you very much. The Executive Secretary and all the protocols observe, and it's great to be back home, like you started. I think there are three things. The first one is, as we think about the EndSARS protest, we need to celebrate the resilience, the defiance, as well as the resistance of young people. And often the clamor for justice is often, for the most part, we ignore the fact that young people demonstrated resilience. And that's how democracy thrives across the world. And so we're having this conversation because young people spoke. And we must continually celebrate that resilience and that defiance. And as we celebrate, or whatever we call it, is to also note that Nigeria owes its citizens a responsibility. And I think that one of the things that has come out of this report is that the Nigerian state owes the victims an apology, and it's not an apology that is one-off, because these reports have clearly shown that citizens were subjected to all forms of human degradation, but they were also subjected to all forms of torture and abuse. And so we call on the state to apologize to the families of the victims, including the families of those who are still in incarceration, and take action by releasing these people who are in incarceration. Because it's not a crime for citizens to speak, it's not a crime for citizens to demand accountability. And tied to this is to call on citizens that there have been attempts, and perhaps to a large extent even successful attempts, to capture spaces where citizens amplify their voices on accountability. And one of them is the streets. Because today, it is challenging for citizens to go out and organize because of the oppression and the repression that greets them every time they speak by marching on the streets. In a democracy, the street is a platform for dialogue between state and citizens. The street is a platform for citizens to reclaim their power. And so any attempt to shrink the civic space and make it difficult for citizens to express their views on the streets is not only unconstitutional, but we are telling citizens and the world that we have no regard for accountability and we have no regard for citizens' voices. And then our democracy begins to die if we limit those spaces for citizens to speak out. And so for us at the IGA Africa, working again with our esteemed partner Enough is Enough and the Human Rights Commission, this matter will continually be on the table until justice is served. And justice isn't just paying compensation. Justice is ensuring even this new outfit, which Yemi just drew my attention to, that there is a new outfit, a special intervention or whatever force that's in the works, that these institutions do not go the same way that SARS and other institutions have gone, which is using the instrumentality of states, exploiting the monopoly of force at the expense of the rights of citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samson. So at this point, I would welcome Yemi Adomolekun, who is the Executive Director of EIE, and I would ask you to join me to welcome her warmly as she comes to launch the report.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. We're trying to keep to time, and we're almost done. And thank you for your concern. I'm fine. Thank you. And I think it's important where Samson left off. Yesterday at the ongoing retreat in Imo, some of us might have seen the clip about the national anthem. So where that is happening, they just launched a new arm unit of the police called the Special Intervention Squad. And it's going to operate in 10 pilot states. And the IGP said the unit will train officers to rapidly intervene in major incidents. The SIS, Special Intervention Squad, will be deployed strictly to combat the menace of violent crimes across the country, a mandate that sounds exactly like the one of SARS. So I think for me it's actually really very instructive that that is happening at the time when we're talking about the fallout from SARS from the judicial panels. But I'd like to, before we kind of launch, we're going to have a digital launch. So if you can show the QR code on the screen, so take a picture and download. You'll have the report on your phones, and we'll go through a few of the pages. If you take your phone, if your phone is a smartphone, scan the code or go to the URL eieng.co/review. You'll be able to have the report on your phones. Give a few minutes for that. There you go. Perfect. That's it. That's it. All right. So I think phones are down. So can we pull up the report itself? So I'll just spend a few minutes going through it. Ikemiset is the lead researcher at SBM Intelligence, and that's the organization that EIE commissioned to do research. We had limited time and limited resources, so most of the research is desk research, so internet searching, and then key informant interviews from IAGA's observers and also youth representatives on the panels in the 29 states and in Abuja. So the content, if you could make it slightly bigger so they can see. Excellent. So our launch partners, 5 for 5 demands, background of the study, executive summary, the key findings, recommendations, a state-by-state snapshot of events, and the EndSARS timeline. Next. Again, a thank you at this point to SBM Intelligence, IAGA Africa, the National Human Rights Commission, Gavel, and with support, we've done this with support from Open Society Africa. Next. So this you will see in the report talks about the 5 for 5 demands, which was what was the summary of the demands of young people with the protest in October 2020, the status of it at the beginning and the status of it now, the progress. There's been progress. The Police Act that the representative of the ministry or the AGF spoke about is one of the things that has come up since then. Increased salary for the police officers was one of the demands as well, and that has also come on board as well. Next. So background of SARS, the police force. Next. And so these now go through the key findings, which Ikemiset spoke about. Next. And then recommendations specifically for federal government, the state government, and then civil society organizations. Next. And then we then go through a snapshot of the 29 states and the FCT. Next. So Lagos State was important, obviously. Nigeria economic capital, the beginning of the protest, and also the location of the Lekki massacre as said by the panel itself. Next. We also highlighted Oyo, and Oyo was important because there was the case of the Oyo 11. Part of the EndSARS protesters, they were jailed and they would be taken to court, and the case kept being adjourned. Some were released last year, I think 3, and then the final 8 were released shortly before elections earlier this year. Next. We also highlighted Anambra for, I guess, majorly because of the, I can't pronounce it well, Akwozo unit of SARS that's quite notorious for enforced disappearance, extrajudicial killing, and that's why we kind of dived a bit into Anambra as a focus state. Next. And then obviously Abuja, Nigeria's political capital, and I mean they sat the longest, and also I think the venue that probably got them, if I'm not mistaken, the most number of petitions, as the chairman had said. Next. And so now this then goes through each state. I won't go through them, but for the other 30 minus 4, other 26 locations, we then do a snapshot of each one. Can you scroll through that really quickly? Different states, and then we have diagrams I want to show at the end. Okay? So this table basically just summarizes the report, the text. So the state, the duration of the sitting, how many petitions were received, the date the report was submitted to the government of the day. If the report has been made public, as we've said, it's only Lagos State that has its report made public, the compensation awarded, and we also included the status of payment, paid or not paid. And another thing that we thought was important to document was, is it the same administration or different? So is it the governor that received the report, that's now the governor in power now? So as we engage and try to push based on some of the recommendations we've heard, are we dealing with the same person or someone who has inherited a report in his administration? Next. I think the notes at hand, this map speaks to what we were saying earlier. If you could shrink it a little bit, there are footnotes so we can see it. So we can see the key to the map. Make it slightly smaller. Excellent. So the states at the top in black are states where no panel was constituted. The states in red, Taraba and Cross River, when we couldn't really get if the report was actually submitted to the government. So those are the 2 in red. And then the rest of the pink, pretty pink that we see is all the reports that have been submitted but are not public. The only public report again is Lagos, and that's the one in the bottom corner that's green. And that's the one that's the only report that's publicly available. Next. And this map then talks about compensation. So states that paid partially, paid in full, and then some states were very clear that their only job was to set up the panel. That because the police officers are a federal institution, then it's the federal government that should pay the compensation. But I think it's also very instructive, and I think the ES mentioned it when he was speaking. We have Abuja as a case study where the federal government did pay the compensation for those who came to the Abuja panel. So the states, the same way they would pay and then go and for roads and then go and collect the money from the federal, if they are invested in justice in their states, they should take that approach. Pay on behalf of the federal government in a sense, and then go back to the federal government and say, we've done the panels as you've asked us to, and this is what we've paid, can we get a refund? And I think moving, hopefully over the next few months, civil society organizations at the state level can take the findings from this report and use that to engage at the state level as we wait for the master report from the National Human Rights Commission. Next slide. And this is just a timeline of public events around the EndSARS protest. From the first protest to literally, I think today is what we've documented. And that end summary is the report. So you have it on your phones. You can follow, reach out to us if you have any questions. And at this point, I'd really like to thank again SBM Intelligence for doing this work for us on a shoestring budget. I'd like to thank IAGA Africa, Samson Itodo, Citizens Gavel for being our partners on this journey, and our main partner and main host, National Human Rights Commission, who have graciously walked with us on this journey, given us the venue. The ES was only supposed to come for the beginning part, but he has sat through the whole proceedings, and just really want to say, yes, please. I just really want to say a big thank you. EndSARS was 3 years ago, but for the comments that Samson has made and that we've heard around the table, it's far from over. It's far from over, not just in terms of people getting justice, compensation, getting officers who have been named, prosecuted, dismissed from the police force, in getting our police thinking more about citizens as people that they're there to serve, but also moving forward in the comments that Samson made about the resilience of young people. Renew's video, I hope it was as emotive as it should have been, in really asking us to remember why we're here, how we got to where we are, why young people agitated and got on the streets, and the fact that it's not over. We talk about security in this country, we talk about peace, but we cannot have peace when there's injustice. And that's just that. If you have a country where young people continually feel that the state does not care for them, and will look the other way when another agent of the state, another arm of the state is doing them harm, we will be uneasy. It will be a state of unease in the country. And we really need to take this seriously. So as the ES said, we deal with the issues proactively, so we don't have another reason for young people to say, you must hear me by force, and I will make sure you hear me, because I will shut this country down. We don't need it. We're all citizens of Nigeria. As my dear friend Aisha Yusufu always says, not one person is more Nigerian than the other. We're all Nigerians, all citizens of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and we should treat ourselves that way, both as state agents, as citizens, as civil society organizations. Mutual respect that we all have a right to live and work in Nigeria safely. And once again, for those who have spent the last 2 hours with us as we've gone through this, thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Okay, so and with that we have come to the end of this event. Thank you very much for coming. And we'll take a group photograph outside at the entrance, please. Thank you very much. And for journalists that were invited, you stay behind. Okay, right here. The picture will be taken right here. Thank you. I think you remain there.